The March 2020 firing of Frank Fritz from American Pickers shocked fans. The actual downpour was on the way though. That was only a light drizzle, because the news of his death in September 2024 rocked their world to its foundations. The most shocking thing that occurred wasn't even his death, sad though it was. The rumors surrounding Frank's final remarks sent shivers down the spines of those who heard them. His estate unveiled something so shocking that no one dared to speak out, just when everyone thought the shock could never get worse. But before we get into the shocking results, let's pay tribute to one of the most devoted fans ever. On October 11, 1963, Frank Fritz came into this world in Davenport, Iowa. His insatiable curiosity set him apart. At a time when most kids his age were obsessed with fly balls and the latest comic books, Frank had an interest in history. He was captivated by stories of all sizes and significance. There were discarded razor blades, old coins, rusted beer cans, and used stamps among these items. He wanted to know the backstory of everything because he believed everything had a purpose, a story, and a life before it arrived here. The more he did, the more he loved it. He progressed from collecting insignificant objects to more valuable treasures, such as motorbikes, dirt bikes, and unique vintage items that were in good condition but had a rich history. He enjoyed playing at estate sales and fighting at flea markets. If an abandoned barn on a deserted road had any antiques, Frank would be the one to knock on its door. In preparation for digging, he was all set. To the average person, it seemed like a strange pastime. For Frank it was a divine calling. However, this is the point at which an unusual trajectory was taken. He took his time before he started collecting antiques. Instead, he was pushed in an opposite direction by life. For nearly 25 years, he served in that capacity in Iowa. This position required meticulousness, accuracy, and a commitment to the safety of others. Despite his dedication to checking fire regulations and inspecting buildings, his love for gathering remained constant. It was his job that exacerbated the problem. Every day he would enter buildings that had lain empty for years, such as old firehouses and warehouses. They contained hidden treasures that were patiently awaiting the discovery of an individual like him who could breathe new life into them. Then he began to amass firefighting-related artifacts, such as leather masks caked in soot, vintage smoke detectors that echoed through the mayhem, and heavily used fire extinguishers. Every one of them was pursued by Frank. It wasn't long before he understood he was onto something more substantial than a personal collection. These artifacts were valuable and fascinating at the same time. As time went on, his pastime of buying and selling items evolved into a small business. He eventually started to entertain the idea of turning his pastime into a full-time career. He had been working steadily for years, but he was now aware of his true calling. His true love overcame the difficulty of leaving a secure job. Jumping was his plan. He launched Frank's Finds, a one-of-a-kind antique shop that offered rare items and tools used by firefighters. In the beginning, it was only a baby step towards something bigger. What he didn't realize, though, was that the job he took on at that small store would lead him on a quest to discover treasure and achieve fame he never imagined imaginable. Frank Fritz was well known even before American Pickers. He was merely an ordinary man who delighted in the excitement of the chase and enjoyed seeking out hidden treasures. However, this wasn't just Frank's opinion. Like me, Mike Wolf was an Iowa native who couldn't get enough of the same thing. Despite the fact that they weren't initially best friends, their shared love of picking brought them closer. Gradually, Mike had a brilliant idea. For him, picking was more than a pastime. It was a way of life with enormous potential. Mike was filming his treasure hunting adventures in the hopes of generating television interest in a show based on them. while Frank was content operating Frank's finds. After some time of being convinced, Frank finally gave his approval. It all started with two guys going on a quest to recover misplaced artifacts, but the reality show soon became a smashing success. The 2010 debut of American Pickers on the History Channel was highly successful. In excess of 1 million viewers, the premiere was a record-breaking launch for the network. While the show did touch on some familiar themes, its primary focus was on the friendship between Mike and Frank. Their bond was genuine, and their excitement was unintentional. They were well respected for their honesty and extensive knowledge in the second-hand world, where they had been making friends for years. With the cameras rolling, they were inviting the public to join in the action. Mike had a knack for business, and was continuously seeking out new opportunities. And Frank, well, Frank was the mastermind behind it all. Conversations that had been tense became light-hearted exchanges because of his talent for making people feel comfortable. He cared about the backstories of the artifacts they discovered, not merely the financial gain. His authenticity won over many admirers. Whether he was joking with a vendor or reminiscing about an old motorbike, the public could tell that he enjoyed his work. For almost a decade, American Pickers was an absolute must-watch. As part of their weekly treasure hunt, Frank and Mike would hit the road to search abandoned houses, garages, and junkyards. To ensure that everything ran smoothly at Antique Archaeology, Danielle Colby remained on staff. Their collaboration was seamless. Friends who shared a love, they were more than simply business partners. Even though Frank's journey appeared to go on forever, it ended in a manner that nobody had anticipated. The initial indications of trouble with American Pickers did not immediately cause concern. The world was so unpredictable in 2020 that most fans thought Frank Fritz would return soon after his last show in March. Little did they realize that Frank was secretly dealing with a plethora of issues that would ultimately alter the course of events. Frank Fritz may not have been forthcoming about his issues, but they eventually became too great to ignore. His followers have tracked his weight fluctuations for a long time. Others suspected malice, while others chalked it up to aging. At last Frank broke the news that he suffered from Crohn's disease, a chronic inflammatory bowel disease. Exhaustion, pain and difficulty in planning are all symptoms. Frank initially attempted to manage it by going on a rigorous diet, which resulted in a 65-pound weight loss. However, Crohn's disease cannot be cured. You have to deal with it on a daily basis. Doing what she loved kept him going even though it hurt. He was exhausted, and he had no idea what was ahead. It wasn't just his health issues, though he was also feeling down about other things. When Frank was famous, things changed, and they were worse at times. After American Pickers gained popularity, things became much more challenging. He had gone from being an ordinary guy in search of antiques to a reality TV star. Everywhere he went, people recognized him and anticipated that he would be just like the charming, intelligent man they saw on television. However, they failed to notice the accompanying stress. According to Frank, his anxiety about being in the spotlight intensified with time. On the other hand, 2020 was a disaster. Frank underwent extensive back surgery due to the deterioration of his health. Unfortunately, the surgery was not simple. He required months of recovery time, had 2 rods implanted in his spine, and endured 185 stitches. Beyond that, he was battling his own personal struggles, including addiction. His departure appeared to be a brief respite that would aid in his recovery and rehabilitation at first. His absence during the 21st season of American Pickers left viewers confused. Then in July of 2021, Mike Wolfe announced Frank's permanent departure. Mike sent Frank a message, wishing him well, and saying he would miss him, but Frank didn't appear to believe it. In an interview he revealed shocking news to fans, and claimed that Mike's statements were meaningless. In all his time in rehab, Mike never once checked in with him to see how he was doing. They have collaborated for many years without exchanging a single phone call. Frank could see they weren't as close as anyone had assumed. Things were different away from the camera. Since Frank was out sick, he reasoned that Mike had been waiting for an opportunity to fire him from the show for quite some time. People were taken aback. Years had passed of them traveling the world, making each other laugh, and creating a hit show. How were they able to end things so abruptly? Lots of people were arguing about it online, which was to be predicted. Others claimed that Frank's private issues were the true cause of his departure, while still others held Mike responsible for his absence. While Frank was speaking, Mike reassured him that he was loved by everyone on the show, and that getting him back on track had been a challenge. A single account could never fully capture the complexity of the truth. Years of working together, strict shooting schedules, long hours, and the pressure of maintaining a hit show left both men exhausted, according to a friend of theirs later on. It was obvious that their relationship was crumbling after Frank's health problems and other personal issues. The friend of the men's claimed that all they needed was some distance, a change of scenery from the monotony of their daily lives for the past decade. Thinking about it now, there wasn't just a single act of betrayal or a major consequence. It chronicled the deterioration of a once close working relationship between two men who, due to fame, stress, and individual issues, had become estranged. For fans, it was all too much. Things were far different between the show and real life when it came to Frank and Mike's cooperation. After leaving television, Frank continued to be quite involved in the antiques industry. Since more and more people were making purchases online, he could tell that gathering styles were evolving. He transformed by launching an online store and establishing global fan connections through social media. Staying up to date wasn't something Frank was interested in. The objective was to maintain the picking spirit's relevance in the modern era. Riding motorcycles was Frank's other favorite pastime, even though he loved antiques. Even as a young boy, he had a passion for bikes. Among his initial substantial acquisitions was a 1964 Harley Davidson. It may have unsettled his parents, but it only deepened his affection for vintage motorcycles. Over the years, he amassed an impressive collection of vintage and rare motorcycles, enough to fill an entire barn. More than just collecting them, he shared his knowledge with others. In 2013, he published a book titled How to Pick Vintage Motorcycles, which covered a wide range of topics, including how to locate hidden treasures and maintain vintage bikes. His love of collecting extended beyond large items. He even included a section on vintage toy bikes. It was all about the details, the artistry, and the backstories of each piece. Frank was not content to only help those with an interest in antiques. He also diligently worked on his own collection. He collaborated with other specialists to host antique fairs, television shows, and other live events that catered to collectors and vendors who shared his passion. Fans get a deeper dive into the picking world in American Pickers, Guide to Picking, which he co-wrote with another person. Not only was Frank exceptional at spotting valuable artifacts, but he also had a way of making history entertaining. He brought the past to life through his stories about old objects, such as a malfunctioning gas pump or a misplaced toy from the 1950s. He used his pickings as a means of perpetuating tales, one reward at a time, rather than merely making a living. A tragic event altered the course of his feud with Mike, which had everyone believing it would drag on for years. A tragic event occurred in July 2022 in Frank's life. At his Davenport, Iowa, home, he suffered a massive stroke. He was unresponsive when assistance arrived, and the situation was dire. Medical professionals rushed him to the hospital and did their best to stabilize him, but the extent of his injuries was too high. Many were anxiously awaiting any updates regarding his condition, hoping against hope that he would be able to persevere. After nearly a month in the ICU, he was transferred to a rehabilitation center to start the arduous process of getting well. A stroke does more than just make you unconscious. It can also strip you of all the things you once considered important. Frank had been on the road for years, closing deals and enjoying life as he saw fit. It was a harsh reality for him to suddenly require assistance with basic tasks. To ensure his daily needs were met and his finances were monitored, the court appointed a guardian after he lost the ability to do so himself. Something he had always treasured, his independence, was now out of his reach. The expense was another consideration. His alleged monthly hospital bills were $29,000. The magnitude of his loss was readily apparent from that sum. However, the way the stroke altered his relationship with Mike was something that went wrong. No one expected Frank to ask to see Mike in May 2023. After years of being estranged, furious, and unable to communicate, they sat down together at last. Afterwards, a friend of theirs who was there expressed sadness about it. Both guys were in tears. No one would ever be able to replace him, Mike assured Frank. First time in years, it wasn't about the show, the company, or who was more righteous. It centered on the friendship they had developed, long before the idea of American Pickers was ever considered. They were just two ordinary guys, with a shared dream, and a passion for the adventure of the chase. That connection persisted through it all. Years of resentment may have covered it up, but it was never truly broken. For Frank, the worst had passed by September 2024. After years of illness, his body could no longer fight. When the call came, Mike didn't hesitate. Those who cared about him knew his time was running out. With Frank's mother and a close family friend by his side, he sprinted to aid Frank. The silence in the room carried the weight of their unspoken thoughts and feelings, much like the burden of their past experiences. Frank and Mike's relationship had been strained for a long time, but in that instant, it was irrelevant. All that remained was their genuine connection, the one that had remained unseen by the public and media. Mike claimed in retrospect that he was the one who held Frank's hand at the moment of his death. "I love you, I forgive you, and everything is okay." His words were gentle and kind, and Frank disappeared without a trace. Before he passed away, Frank spoke some disturbing but crucial last words. "The past is never really gone. It's always with us, hiding in the shadows." These words, spoken by a man whose entire life had been devoted to recovering long-lost treasures, had an ethereal quality to them. His loved ones mourn his loss, and try to piece together his final thoughts. According to his death certificate, Frank passed away as a result of complications stemming from a stroke. On top of that, he had to cope with aortic stenosis, a medical condition that made even the most basic activities, like breathing, standing and walking, extremely painful. His physical form had endured much hardship and struggled mightily throughout, but it was ultimately unable to continue due to its weakness. Despite the fact that his passing signified the end of an era, the subsequent discovery of his estate was so shocking that not even his closest friends and family could believe it. Everyone knew that Frank had a thing for bikes, but few realized just how extensive his collection had become. Even his closest friends and family were shocked to see his private garage filled with rows upon rows of old motorcycles. When the doors were finally opened after his death, some have been restored to their former glory and now sparkle under the spotlight, while others lie in wait, dusty and awaiting their moment to shine. A lot of time and effort had gone into amassing this collection of unique choppers, vintage Harley-Davidsons, and rare Indian motorcycles. The love for the work was evident from the bikes that were either completely repaired or still in pieces. These machines weren't merely tools to Frank, they were relics of thrilling times and evidence of his laborious picking efforts. He had spent years restoring them, after searching the nation for them, and he held them dear to his heart, as if they were priceless relics from his past. The idea of selling them is nearly insane to those who knew how much he valued them. Supposedly, A sale of all the bikes, old signs and treasured artifacts from the past is already set to take place later this year. The surprise element, though, is about to come. There will be no investment in a company or an estate fund with these funds. Instead, they will be donated to charity, fulfilling Frank's lifelong desire. This act of kindness will be his final one.